Well, to me, the experience of trauma is one that is inevitable. I think the actual birth experience is quite traumatic because here you are igniting the senses in your body, the five senses, coming off the womb after 9 months of just baking, simply having nothing to do, nothing to think about. You don't have to apply anything at that point. You're simply in the womb, generating all the aspects of your life, meaning your organs, everything you're going to need, developing your body until you are ready to then experience the trauma. I mean, I can go into details about this in other videos, certainly on my podcast about it. But trauma is something that's inevitable. And now, the quantity of how traumatic things get, that's another issue as well. But in general, trauma is somehow a necessary thing because it comes, we experience it in our lives individually based on our own path, as we come into this physical existence, meaning being alive and being born and then developing and adjusting into this already moving train, I always say. It's like climbing on a train that's already moving. And so you get in there and you have to adjust into that. That's why when you're younger, before you are colonized, so to speak, or before you're programmed by the characteristics of life, of physical life. If you're a human, you adapt to that human life experience, rooted into what's going on first in your household. What you're being taught by your parents, what you observe on a practical daily basis. Obviously, the more conscious you are, the more exposed you are, the more you adapt and assume your own way of dealing with things, and you compartmentalize things based on what you see and so on. So, and then of course things that happen, whether they are induced by certain elements in your life, whether through your parents, through your culture, your community, and so on, you're going to go through that. And so in that sense, trauma is inevitable. Traumatic experiences are inevitable. Now the question is, how do you then deal with your amount of trauma you've experienced? And this is where things starts going, taking shape. Things start taking shape in that fashion, because you start looking for ways to deal with it or avoid it or to numb it. And that in itself creates the habits and patterns in which you learn to deal with your trauma and to avoid. And then you eventually notice, it's getting intense, or maybe it's getting better eventually, and you constantly eventually have to continue update how you deal with it and your mechanism of coping and so on. And this, based on the amount of intensity of your trauma, the more you let go, you don't contract. The more you expand and be open. Actually, it's quite the opposite in that sense, and people usually do the opposite. We tend to contract as a mechanism of protection, not realizing that when we contract, then we are broadcasting that signal, attracting more and more um, unpleasant situation. Whereas when you open and expand, you release, and therefore you get rid of the blockages, the intensity of protective energy that you're the one doing all of this to yourself. That's really the point. So, meaning that it all depends on you. And this is important to discuss, especially right now, because it's more like the foundation through which one has to be aware before moving out and start working on and developing ways in which you have a healthy way of dealing. You can conceptualize a much more fluid and sync that works with you. Everybody else will, has to do it differently based on their own life experience. So it's very critical to come to ground zero, so to speak, like to come to default and really understand what is the grounding, where is ground zero, where is the Holy Grail, where you start, and then move from there with clear awareness of what the characteristics of your life experience, and understanding that will give you a very it'll help you cultivate, and it'll certainly open up the terrain in which you can start the journey of healing properly. And that way you can along the way you trigger all these things become more clearer to you, and then naturally you gravitate towards that gives you relief, because you have a very good understanding of your situation, and you work from there. I thought this was very important to understand as a foundation to what trauma is really. And we're going to get into the dynamics of the different kinds of trauma, into the dynamics of your specific experience, into the dynamics of techniques and ways that I can share that have helped me deal with my trauma. And I'm in no way suggesting that there's a destination to it. It's a lifetime commitment. It's as long as you're alive, you are going to be engaged in a journey to self-mastery, which is really the point, to master yourself, conquer yourself. And so I wanted to share that with you as an introduction to this course. Thank you.